You lie back, somewhere quiet, somewhere soft. The day folds in on itself, leaving only the hush of night. Your body knows it is time to let go. The pillow holds you. The air slows with your breath. A thin curtain of darkness covers the edges of the world. Tonight, the story will carry you gently through shadowed places. Places where memory and myth blur. Where queens wear crowns of bone or crowns of stars. And sometimes both at once. Where desire and dread are braided together in the oldest tales we know. You don't have to follow each step. You don't need to reach the end. The past will still be there, waiting, like a candle still burning in the corner of a forgotten room. You may drift, you may wander, you may sleep. But before you do, you might wonder, who are the queens of vampires? Are they monsters, or mothers, or simply mirrors of human fear? No pressure. There won't be a test at the end. If quiet history like this helps you rest or wander, consider subscribing. It lets this small corner of calm keep growing. And if you're still awake, share your time and place below. I'd love to know who's listening tonight. So now, close your eyes and step softly into the sand-colored dusk of the world's first civilizations, where whispers of blood and goddesses begin. The air is warm, thick with incense. You walk among clay tablets, their pressed marks catching torchlight. Around you, the temples of Mesopotamia rise like great stairs into the night sky, leading to gods who watch from above. Here, stories are carved into earth itself, meant to last as long as stone. And among these stories, some speak of women not quite divine, not quite human, who thirst for what others have. The name comes to you, Lilitu. A figure of the night. Her wings spread wide in cuneiform hymns. Her body both alluring and terrible. Some say she slips through windows to steal infants from cradles. Others say she takes men in their sleep, leaving them pale, emptied of breath. In these earliest tales, you find the seed of what will later be called vampire, a queen not by crown, but by fear and reverence. In the old texts, she is called a demon. Yet, the line between goddess and demon is thin. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians believed that power always had two faces, one that nurtures and one that devours. Lilitu was the devouring face. She ruled not over cities or armies, but over the night itself. You imagine a mother in ancient awe, rocking her child, and whispering charms to keep Lilitu away. Clay amulets pressed with prayers were hung above doors, marked with lions or owls to frighten her. But still, the stories say, she came. The night was her throne room. Some trace her into later Hebrew texts where she becomes Lilith, the first wife of Adam, who refused to bow, who fled Eden, and who was said to drink the blood of newborns in revenge. Whether or not the myths are seamless, you feel the thread a woman outside the order of men, made monstrous for her refusal to yield. Nearby, in the same ancient lands, other names surface. Lamashtu, the lion-headed goddess with donkey's teeth, was feared for attacking mothers and infants. Her amulets, too, were pressed into clay. Her image meant to repel her even as people admitted her power. She drank blood. She chewed on bones. She stalked the edges of life. You think about the strangeness of it, how mothers prayed to one goddess for milk and fertility, and feared another who might turn that milk to blood. In the gap between nurturing and consuming, the vampire queen is born. You walk further through time, the torches thinning, the sands shifting beneath your feet. The desert night is vast above you, stars scattered like silver dust, and you sense that these stories told around fires whispered into the ears of children became the soil where darker myths grew. Why blood? You ask yourself, softly, like a breath. Why always blood? Perhaps because blood is life. In a world where childbirth was dangerous, where war and famine were constant, the spilling of blood was close, too close. To imagine a figure who takes it by choice, who drinks it for strength, is to imagine power at its most terrifying. But you notice something else. These queens of shadow are not mindless beasts. They are women with agency, women who choose, women who frighten because they cannot be controlled. Lilitu is not tamed. Lamashtu is not bound. Lilith does not return. They unsettle the order where men rule and women obey. They make the night belong to them. You pause by a ruined ziggurat, its bricks crumbling under the moon. You hear the echo of chants once sung here. Maybe the people believed they could push back against these night queens with offerings, charms, or the steady recitation of prayers, but you suspect that even then, even in the oldest of times, the fear never fully lifted. As you sit in the silence, you remember that stories travel. They do not stay in one city, one empire. They cross rivers, mountains, seas, and the image of the blood-drinking woman, the devouring mother, the queen of shadows, will find new forms in new lands. Soon you will hear of Lamia, of Strix, of hags and succubi, but for now in this desert night, you rest with the first queens of vampires born from clay, fire, and fear. You let the incense curl upward. You let the stars widen above you. You let the night itself whisper its old, hungry names. And still, you breathe. You wait. You drift. You walk onward, past the clay tablets and crumbling ziggurats, past the whisper of Lamashtu and Lilitu. Further along the river of time, the torchlight of Mesopotamia fades, and in its place comes the pale gleam of marble and the sharp echo of sandals against stone. The world has shifted. You are in Greece now. The air is salt-touched and restless. The sea breathes in and out, as though the horizon itself is alive. And here too, people told stories of women who lived between desire and dread, women who drank life away. Among them, one stands taller, her sorrow stretched into nightmare. Once, they say, Lamia was a queen. Some call her the daughter of Poseidon, some call her a Libyan princess. The details bend and twist across the centuries, but always, she was beautiful, and she caught the eye of Zeus. You know by now what happens when Zeus notices a mortal woman. The union brought children. But Hera, queen of Olympus, was not gentle with rivals. She cursed Lamia. In some tellings, she killed the children outright. In others, she cursed Lamia never to close her eyes, so she would forever watch her children's deaths, and in her grief, in her madness, Lamia became something else. You picture her wandering the rocky coastlines, her hair tangled with salt, her eyes wide and sleepless. Her grief makes her monstrous. She begins to take children from others, to drink their blood, to devour what she has lost. She becomes the child killer, the first vampire queen in Greek imagination. But her story is not only about blood, it is about transformation. She is sometimes drawn with a woman's face and a serpent's lower body, her beauty twisted into horror. Some say she could remove her eyes at will, placing them in a jar, then slipping them back when she wanted to see. Her body, her very being, is marked by loss. You hear the hush of Greek mothers lulling their infants to sleep with warnings. Don't cry, or Lamia will come for you. You hear the soft scrape of charms hung above cradles, much like the amulets of Mesopotamia. Across cultures, the pattern repeats. A woman, once powerful or beloved, turned into a predator of children, a thief of blood. You notice too that Lamia is not always alone. In later versions, her name becomes a kind of category. Lamia, a whole group of blood-drinking, night-haunting women. The singular becomes plural. The queen becomes a lineage. It is strange, you think, how myths carry both punishment and power. Hera's curse was meant to destroy Lamia, to strip her of joy, but instead it gave her a dark immortality. People still whisper her name long after her kingdom is dust. She endures because she frightens, she reigns because she unsettles. The Greeks told many stories of women who devour, who seduce, who drain life. The Empusa, for example, a creature who could take many forms, often that of a beautiful woman who lured men to their deaths. She was said to have a single leg of brass and another of donkey's flesh, a reminder that beauty can disguise strangeness. Men traveling lonely roads at night were warned to beware her. They said she drank blood, like Lamia, like Lilitu before her. And the Greeks were not alone in this. Across the Mediterranean, people told of the Mormo, another child stealer, another dark nurse of death. These names overlap, blur, and mingle. They are different faces of the same fear. You pause in a Greek courtyard. Olive trees shift in the night breeze. A kylix, a shallow drinking cup, sits abandoned on a marble step. Somewhere, a flute plays, slow and mournful. You feel the weight of these tales, how they slip into lullabies, into warnings, into the corners of ordinary life. To the Greeks, Lamia was not just a distant legend, she was a whisper in the nursery, a shadow on the road, a reason to keep watch when the night stretched too long. The Queen of Libya, turned serpent, turned monster. And yet, in her you glimpse something else, a woman who suffered and refused to suffer alone. Her hunger is born of grief, her thirst is made from loss. The stories condemn her, but they cannot forget her. You think of the mothers again. In every era they seem to be the ones who bear these stories. They are the ones who whisper prayers, who hang charms, who hush restless children, perhaps because they knew how fragile life was, how close death lingered. A fever, a bad birth, a sudden illness. Life could drain away quickly. To give that terror a name, to place it in the hands of a queen of vampires, was a way to shape the fear. You hear footsteps in the dust of history. They are moving you forward again, past the Greek courtyards, past the morning of Lemia, toward Rome, where new words are carved into stone, and new wings beat in the night. The road carries you farther west, and the air grows heavier, thick with the perfume of olives and the smoke of hearth fires. The Mediterranean glimmers nearby, reflecting moonlight like scattered silver. The voices of Greece soften and fade, and new voices rise, Latin now, stern and structured. You are in Rome. The empire breathes around you. Stone arches tower overhead, aqueducts run like ribs across the land, and everywhere the pulse of Roman order beats steady and strong. But even here, in the heart of law and discipline, shadows stir. Shadows with wings, shadows that thirst. The Romans feared them. They gave them names. One was Strix, plural striges. It meant owl, but not the kind you imagine perched quietly in a barn or forest. These were night owls of hunger, women with wings, sometimes with hooked claws, who slipped through windows to suck blood. Children were their prey most often, but sometimes adults too were found pale and weakened, whispering of something that pressed on their chests in the dark. The striges were said to shriek at night, their cries carrying over rooftops, a sound that curdled the stomach. The poets wrote of them. Ovid mentions their hunger, how they drain infants. Horace, in his satire, imagines witches who call upon them. The line between witch and vampire, bird and woman, was thin. The Romans did not mind if boundaries blurred. They feared what happened when boundaries broke. You picture a Roman household at night. The atrium cool, a small lamp burning near the family shrine. A child sleeps, and a mother leans over, murmuring a prayer to the Lares, the household gods. Somewhere beyond the walls, an owl screeches, long and low. The mother shivers. Is it a bird or a Strix? She lays an amulet near the cradle, just in case. The Romans had remedies. They spoke charms, they burned herbs, they hung protective branches. In the Fasti, Ovid describes rituals against the striges, how beans and words of power could repel them. He tells of the goddess Acca Larentia, a mother figure, stepping in to guard children from these night terrors. Even in their most rational moments, the Romans could not fully banish the old fears. They only wrapped them in ritual, hoping order could outweigh chaos. But you know how fear works. It slips through cracks. It enters stories, then songs, then jokes. It stays. By the late Empire, the word Strix was already sliding into medieval tongues, changing shape, becoming the Italian strega, the witch. A whole lineage of superstition unfurls from that root. You see now how the vampire queen wears many masks. And in Rome she wore feathers. Yet feathers were not her only guise. The Romans also spoke of women who poisoned or enchanted men, draining their strength not through talons but through touch. Folklore tangled them with striges, calling them Lamia too, adopting the Greek word and its dread. Rome was always hungry for other people's myths, reshaping them into its own. Lamia and Strix, owl and serpent, witch and queen, all swirled together in the Roman night. You imagine yourself walking down a Roman street after sunset. Torches gutter along the walls. But the shadows between them are long. You hear a flutter, a cry. Perhaps it is only a bird, perhaps not. You quicken your step. You feel how real the stories must have felt to them. And then, in your wandering, you reach the Roman graveyards, the necropolis. Here, just beyond the city gates, rows of tombs line the road. Some are grand, carved with Latin inscriptions, busts of ancestors gazing out with stone eyes. Others are small, modest, marked only by a name. The Romans visited these places often, leaving offerings of food and wine for the dead. They believed the spirits lingered, restless if neglected. And among these tombs, the stories of Strigas grew strong, because here life and death met, and boundaries were thinnest. A poet whispers in your ear, Propertius writing of witches boiling herbs, of Strigas feasting. Another whispers, Petronius, mocking old women feared as blood drinkers. Even when the educated laughed, they could not quite dismiss it. The joke itself proved the fear lived close. What fascinates you is how often these tales centered on women. Men could be ghosts, soldiers, gladiators, emperors. But when it came to draining life in secret, when it came to slipping through windows and pressing on sleepers, it was women who were imagined. Always women. Perhaps because power in Rome was meant to be male, public, controlled. A woman's power, quiet and hidden, felt dangerous. So the stories gave it wings. You let your eyes follow the curve of the moon. You imagine those wings beating against it, silhouettes crossing silver light. The Roman night is filled with prayers, charms, and unease, and you see, clearly now, how the vampire queen changes with each culture yet remains the same. She is always at the edge, always feared, always enduring. But time, as always, carries you onward. Rome too will fall. The marble will crumble, the Latin will bend into new tongues. The empire's roads will break, but its stories will survive. Strix will become Strega, will become Strigoi in far-off lands. And in the Middle Ages, when the nights feel longer, when plague and famine press in, the vampire queen will take new shapes again. She will become hag, succubus, nightmare. For now, though, you linger a moment longer in Rome. You hear the laughter of diners spilling from a tavern, the clink of cups, the warmth of life. And beyond it, faint but certain, you hear the shriek of something winged in the dark. The Romans heard it too. They named it. They feared it. They lived with it. You walk on, past arches and tombs, past the 7 hills. The torch in your hand grows dim, but the path is clear. Ahead lies the Middle Ages, and with it, the next throne room of the queens of vampires. But before you leave, you glance back at her. The sleepless queen, her eyes wide, unclosing, her hair a salt-drenched snarl. She does not vanish when you turn away. She remains, perched in the shadows of memory. The first queen of vampires to rise in the Western imagination. The road is long, the torchlight flickers. You walk on. The road is long, and the centuries shift beneath your feet. Stone arches crumble into moss. Latin softens into the chanting tongues of monks. The empire is gone, but its roads remain, worn and quiet, threading through fields and forests. You feel the air cool. The lamps of Rome are behind you. Ahead lies a darker, slower world. The Middle Ages stretch before you with their cloisters and castles, their markets and monasteries, their silence and their superstition. Here the vampire queen has not vanished. She has only changed her mask again. You walk along a narrow lane, lined with wooden houses that lean inward, as though whispering secrets. Smoke curls from chimneys. A dog barks and falls silent. Somewhere, a church bell tolls the hour. Night gathers fast in this age. For light is precious, shadows come early, and with them, stories. The people here fear many things. They fear plague and famine, witches and demons, the restless dead. And in their tales, the queens of the night appear again. Sometimes as hags, sometimes as succubi, sometimes as nameless shapes pressing on their chests as they sleep. You step into a cottage. A woman lies in bed, eyes wide, chest rising and falling too quickly. She tries to speak but cannot. Something is on her chest, heavy, and unseen. She cannot move. She cannot breathe. This is the night hag. People say she visits sleepers, especially men, pressing the air from their lungs, leaving them gasping. In truth, you know this is sleep paralysis, a trick of the mind and body, but they did not know. They gave it a face, a figure, a queen of the night. The hag, in their imagination, is old, bent, with tangled hair and sharp teeth. She drinks not only breath, but sometimes blood. In Germany they call her Alp, in Scandinavia Mara. The very word nightmare comes from her. She is a queen of terror, ruling the borderland between waking and dreaming. You walk on, into another chamber. A monk sits at his desk by the glow of a single candle. He writes in Latin, his script tight and careful. He copies tales of demons who visit men in the night, taking their seed, leaving them weak and wasted. These are succubi, female spirits of lust. Their sisters, the incubi, are salt women. But the succubi are feared for their hunger, their persistence. They drain not only life, but also soul. Imagine the fear of waking and feeling as though someone had touched you in your sleep, someone unseen. In the cloisters, where men vowed celibacy, the succubus became an explanation, a shadowy queen who visited against the will. She embodied both sin and punishment, desire and dread. And still, beyond monasteries and courts, in villages and fields, people spoke of women who knew too much, women who healed with herbs, women who muttered charms, witches, they called them. And witches too were said to fly by night, to drain the life from infants, to feast in secret. The old roots of Lilitu and Lamia sprouted again in this soil, tangled now with Christian fear of heresy. You hear the voices of trial records, harsh and suspicious, women accused of consorting with demons, of drinking blood, of stealing children in the dark. Some confessed under torture, some denied until the end. All carried the mark of the vampire queen, whether or not they wore it themselves. The fear made it real. But not all was fire and accusation. Some stories were softer, stranger. In Slavic lands, tales spread of the Upper Vrkolikas, the restless dead who rose from their graves to drink the blood of kin. Sometimes they were men, sometimes women, but always, the fear of a corpse refusing to stay buried haunted the imagination. And here in these tales, you catch a glimpse of what would later become the vampire we know, the fangs, the blood, the hunger beyond the grave. The women among them were remembered most vividly. A mother who died in childbirth might be suspected of returning at night, walking to the cradle, nursing her child with blood instead of milk. A widow might be whispered about, pale and wandering at dusk, as though she could not quite leave the living. The line between ghost and vampire blurred, but the power was the same. They became queens of shadow, feared even by those who had once loved them. You wander into a graveyard. The earth is uneven, the stones rough-hewn. Crosses lean against the sky. In the corner, a shallow pit has been dug. Within it, a body lies face down, a rock shoved into its mouth. This was a way to stop a suspected vampire from rising, to block the hunger. Some bodies were buried with scythes across their necks, so they would cut themselves if they tried to stand. Others were pinned with stakes or weighed with stones. You shiver, not from the chill, but from the thought. These were real fears, strong enough to shape the way people treated their dead. And you think of the whispers. How often the dead were women, suspected of returning. A midwife who had crossed someone, a widow who had lived alone too long, a woman who had died strangely. Fear made queens of them, even in death. You walk on. The bell tolls again, low and slow. The air is damp, thick with wood smoke. You pass through markets where people trade charms, wolf teeth, sprigs of herbs, small crosses, tokens against the night. You hear the murmured prayers of mothers, the muttered psalms of priests, all trying to hold back what they could not name directly. And still, the vampire queen remained, cloaked in hag and succubus, ghost and witch. She was the embodiment of all that slipped past order, all that could not be controlled. She reigned, not from a throne, but from every bed where someone woke breathless, every cradle where a child stirred in the dark, every grave dug a little deeper than needed. The Middle Ages were long, Centuries stretched like shadows. But through them all, the stories endured. And by the end, when the Renaissance dawned, and the world shifted again, these queens of the night had grown roots deep in the European imagination. They would be ready, when new fears and new obsessions arose, to put on yet another crown. For now, you linger a little in the village square. The houses lean close, the thatch damp with dew. You feel the presence of the hag, the succubus, the restless woman who slips through cracks in walls and minds. She is everywhere and nowhere, a queen of the unseen. The path grows colder as you walk. The narrow lanes of medieval villages slip behind you, and the sound of bells softens into silence. The air grows heavier, as though snow might fall. The forests deepen, tall pines creaking in the wind. You are in Central Europe now, among the hills of Hungary, where castles sit like silent sentinels above valleys. And here, among stone towers and iron gates, the vampire queen takes on flesh again, this time not as myth, but as a woman with a name. Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess. You stand before her castle at Cutty, its walls looming against the winter sky. The stones are scarred with time, but still, the shape of power remains. You can almost hear the iron hinges groaning as the gates close, shutting out the world, locking in secrets. Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful families of Hungary. She was a noble woman, educated, refined. She spoke many languages: Latin, German, Hungarian. She was married to a Count, Ferenc Nadasdy, and ruled vast estates in his absence while he fought in wars. She was not a shadowy figure on the edge of society. She was the center of it, a woman of privilege and influence. And yet, in the centuries since, she has been remembered as one of history's most infamous monsters. The legend says she killed hundreds of young women, that she lured them to her castle with promises of work, then tortured and murdered them, that she bathed in their blood to preserve her beauty, that her thirst for youth and immortality made her a vampire queen, not of myth but of flesh. You walk into the castle halls. The air is cold, the windows narrow, the stones seem to listen. Servants scurry past, their eyes lowered. Rumors curl like smoke through the corridors, whispers of missing girls, screams heard at night, bodies carried away under cover of darkness. But what is truth? And what is story? Historical records tell us she was indeed accused of terrible crimes. In 1610, King Matthias of Hungary ordered an investigation. Witnesses came forward, hundreds of them, claiming to have seen or heard of her cruelty. Some spoke of beatings, burnings, mutilation. Others claimed she drank the blood of her victims. Her most trusted servants were accused as accomplices. In 1611 she was put on trial, though she herself was never brought into court. Her servants were executed. She was sentenced to life in confinement, walled into a room in her castle where she remained until her death in. The numbers are staggering. Some testimonies claim she killed 80 girls, others 650. But historians doubt the highest figures. Many believe the stories of bathing in blood were added later, part of the legend that grew around her name. Some even argue she was a victim of politics. Her vast wealth and power made her dangerous to the crown, and the charges were exaggerated to bring her down. Yet, the legend persists. The image of a countess, pale and regal, standing in a tub filled with blood, her skin gleaming, her eyes cold, is too strong to fade. She became a living Lamia, a modern Lilith, a queen of vampires clothed not in myth but in silk and lace. You imagine her standing at a mirror, the flicker of candlelight across her face. Does she see the lines of age, the faint marks of time? Does she believe blood can erase them? Or is the blood merely a story told by others, a way of explaining her cruelty, her power, her difference? Her name spread quickly. Stories of the Blood Countess echoed across Europe. She was compared to Dracula, though she lived a century later. Writers and storytellers wrapped her in layers of horror, turning her into a legend. By the 19th century, she had become an icon of Gothic imagination. Alongside the monsters of fiction, she was the queen of vampires, crowned not by fangs or wings but by fear. You walk through the ruined rooms of her castle. The walls are bare now, the tapestries long gone. The hearths are cold. But in the silence, you feel the weight of centuries of whispers. You see her in two ways at once. One, a woman trapped by politics, condemned by rumor. The other, a monster bathing in the blood of virgins. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between. Perhaps the truth has been lost altogether, replaced by legend. But the legend matters. It shaped how people imagined female vampires from then on, no longer only hags or demons, but aristocrats, refined women of high birth, hiding cruelty behind elegance. The vampire queen was no longer just a shadow in the night. She was a lady in a castle, a noble woman with servants and gowns, who could rule by fear as well as charm. You step back into the courtyard. Snow begins to fall, light and quiet. The towers stand against the grey sky, lonely now. Elizabeth is gone, her bones buried, her voice silenced, but her story lives, retold in books, plays, films. She has become a symbol, both of horror and of fascination. What does it mean, you wonder, that a woman accused of cruelty becomes a vampire queen in memory? Is it a way of punishing powerful women, branding them as monsters? Or is it a way of admitting that beauty, power, and hunger frighten us most when they belong to women? The snow thickens. The road waits. The centuries move. Ahead lies literature, the Gothic age, when vampire queens would step out of castles, not as whispers but as characters, written into ink and shadow. Carmilla waits there, in a book of faded pages, her hand outstretched. But before you reach her, you glance back one last time. The castle stands in silence. The snow covers the stones, and somewhere in the wind, you think you hear laughter, soft, distant and regal. The snow and stone of Hungary dissolve, and the road becomes softer beneath your feet. You are moving into the 19th century now, into a time of candlelit parlours, long velvet curtains, and the steady scratching of pens across paper. The world is quieter here, and more curious. Science and superstition wrestle in the same drawing rooms. Ghost stories are read aloud by firelight, while gas lamps flicker in the streets outside. The Gothic age has dawned, and the vampire queen is ready for a new crown. This time made not of myth or trial, but of words. Her name is Carmilla. You see the year, 1872. A slim volume lies open on a table, its pages yellowed by time. The title is simple. In a glass darkly, a collection of tales by Sheridan Le Fanu. Among them, one story glows brighter than the rest. Carmilla. You sit by the fire, and the story unfolds. You are in a remote Austrian castle, surrounded by dense forests. The narrator is a young woman named Laura, sheltered, innocent, living with her father in lonely quiet. One evening, a carriage accident brings a mysterious guest to their home. Carmilla, a young woman with dark eyes and an air of strangeness. She is injured. She must stay to recover. Laura welcomes her, and thus begins one of the first true vampire tales of literature, years before Dracula. But Carmilla is not Dracula. She is something different, something softer and stranger. She is beautiful, languid, often ill. She sleeps late into the day and prowls at night. She grows too close to Laura, touching her, whispering to her, watching her as she sleeps. Their relationship is intimate, unsettling, threaded with longing. And soon, Laura begins to waste away, her health slipping, her strength ebbing. Nightmares come, of a large cat leaping onto her chest, of sharp pains at her neck. Always Carmilla is there. The story is simple, yet haunting. Carmilla is eventually revealed as a vampire, preying on young women across the countryside. She is tracked down, her tomb opened, her body staked and burned, but she lingers in memory. Laura never forgets her. The bond remains, beyond words, beyond death. What makes Carmilla so powerful is not only that she is a vampire, it is that she is a woman who loves women. In 1872, when such things could not be spoken openly, Le Fanu wrote a tale where the vampire queen's hunger was both blood and desire. She embodies forbidden love, cloaked in horror, yet irresistible. You see how carefully the story is built. Carmilla is aristocratic, like Elizabeth Bathory, But she is also intimate, like the succubi of old. She moves between rooms with a soft step, her presence both comforting and unsettling. She is not the monstrous hag of the Middle Ages, but neither is she wholly human. She belongs to a lineage that stretches back to Lamia and Lilith, but she wears a new mask, one made of lace and longing. You imagine yourself in Laura's place, walking through the shadowed halls, candle in hand, feeling the gaze of Carmilla behind you. The air is heavy, perfumed, almost too sweet. You want to turn, to meet her eyes, though you know you should not. The danger is not only death, but surrender. This is what makes Carmilla a queen among vampires. She rules not by fear alone, but by desire. Readers of her time would have felt both attraction and unease, the thrill of what should not be named. Carmilla blurred the line between victim and lover, between predator and beloved, and she did so decades before Bram Stoker would write Dracula. The influence spread quietly at first. The story was not an immediate sensation, but later writers and readers would return to it, again and again, seeing in Carmilla the seed of something larger. She was the archetype for every female vampire that followed, elegant, sensual, dangerous. The brides of Dracula, the countesses of Hammer Films, the Akasha of Anne Rice, all carry her blood in their veins. You wander through the pages. The forests press close, the castle walls drip with damp. In the silence you can almost hear Carmilla's voice. Soft, coaxing, "You are mine, you shall be mine, you and I are one forever." You do not need to read further to know her fate. She will be hunted, exposed, destroyed. But you also know that in memory, she will never die. Lefanu gave the vampire queen her modern throne. He clothed her in story, gave her a name that still lingers, gave her a hunger that was more than blood, and in doing so, he shaped the path for what would come next. You close the book. The fire flickers low. Outside, the night is deep and waiting. Somewhere you sense Carmilla still walking, her step light, her hand brushing your sleeve. She smiles, secretive, knowing that every telling of her death is also a telling of her survival. She is not gone. She never is. The 19th century holds many shadows still. Ahead lies another, darker tale, Dracula. But tonight, before you leave this parlour, you linger with Carmilla. You feel her gaze, you hear her whisper, you taste the sweetness of her promise. And when you rise to leave, the chair behind you is empty. Or so it seems. The parlour fades. The fire dies down. You walk out into a deeper night, a night filled with fog and iron lamplight. The world has shifted again. The year is 1897. The printing presses hum. A new book has just entered the world, its pages bound in cloth, its story destined to echo louder than most. The name stamped across the cover is Dracula. You feel the weight of it in your hands. You know it already, even before you open it. Bram Stoker's novel is one of the most enduring stories of all time. It gave us the image of the vampire that endures even now. The tall count from Transylvania, pale and powerful, feeding on blood, yet tucked within its chapters, behind the shadow of Dracula himself, there is another presence. Softer, stranger, often overlooked, but vital. The Brides of Dracula. You open the book, and you find yourself in a castle. The Carpathian Mountains rise outside, jagged and bleak. Wolves howl in the distance. Inside, Jonathan Harker, the English solicitor, sits at a long table. His host, Count Dracula, has left him alone. The castle is silent, but then, from the darkened corners, he sees movement. 3 women emerge. They are beautiful, terribly so. They move with grace, their lips red, their eyes gleaming. They circle him, whispering, laughing. They lean close, their breath warm against his neck. And just as one of them bends to bite, Dracula bursts in with fury. "This man belongs to me," he says. He throws them back, but not before Harker has felt their presence seductive, terrifying, unforgettable. These are the brides of Dracula. They appear only briefly in the novel, yet they linger. Stoker does not give them names, but he gives them power. They are not pale corpses, but women of beauty, hungry and alive. They embody both attraction and dread. For Victorian readers, their presence was deeply unsettling. Women were supposed to be passive, pure, domestic. These brides were none of those things. They were active, desiring, dangerous. You walk closer to them. Their dresses sweep across the stone floor. Their laughter curls like smoke. They do not need names, because they are archetypes. They are hunger itself. Where Carmilla whispered her love, the brides pounce. Where medieval hags pressed on chests, the brides press lips to throats. They are the embodiment of feminine appetite, unashamed and unrestrained. The Victorians feared such appetite. The novel reflects this. The brides are destroyed in the end, staked and silenced, their hunger erased. But the fact of them remains. They reveal that within the heart of Dracula, beneath the surface of Gothic horror, lies a fear of female power, of women who might claim desire for themselves. You notice how Stoker writes them. Jonathan Harker admits to a kind of fascination, even as he fears them. He calls their beauty voluptuous. He confesses he both dreads and longs for their touch. It is this tension between terror and attraction that gives the brides their lasting hold. They are queens, not of a nation, but of the heart's secret fears. You picture the scene again, the castle, the cold stone, the flicker of lamplight. The brides close in, their whispers are in your ear. They promise sweetness, release, surrender. For a moment you imagine giving in, and then Dracula storms in, furious, possessive. He will not He guards his prey jealously. Even in undeath, even in myth, women are placed beneath male command. But when you step back, when you read carefully, you see the brides differently. They are not merely Dracula's possessions. They are the mirror he cannot escape. He claims to be master, but they remind us that hunger is not his alone. They take what they want. They frighten not because they are his, but because they are their own. And from this brief appearance, the archetype spreads. Later films and stories give them more space, more voice. They become central to the vampire myth, the beautiful, deadly women who wait in castles and crypts, their lips stained red, their eyes alight with hunger. They are brides, but they are also queens, each one a reflection of Carmilla, each one a sister to Lamia and Lilith. You walk through the castle, hearing their footsteps behind you. Their laughter drifts down staircases, echoing in chambers. You see them at windows, watching the moon. You know they will be destroyed, but you also know they will return. They always do. When Dracula was first published, it unsettled readers in many ways. It was about foreignness, about disease, about invasion, but hidden within it was also the question of women's roles. Mina and Lucy, the novel's heroines, are caught between purity and corruption. Lucy, when bitten, becomes almost like the bride, seductive, ravenous, cruel. She is staked to save her soul, her appetite punished. Mina, pure and self-sacrificing, survives. The contrast is stark. And so in Stoker's tale, the vampire queens are allowed only one fate, destruction. Yet their memory lingers louder than expected. Readers remember the brides. Readers remember Lucy's hunger. Readers remember that moment when desire itself seemed to walk across the page. You step out of the castle, into the cold night. The Carpathian mountains loom, sharp against the stars. Wolves howl again. You feel the wind cut through your cloak. And yet, behind you, in the silence of the castle, you can still hear them. The three women, the brides of Dracula, moving, whispering, waiting. You pause, you breathe, you drift. The road is not done. Ahead lies the 20th century, when the vampire queen will step from books onto screens, when her image will flicker in silver light and fill darkened theatres. The brides will rise again, but they will not be alone. New queens will claim the throne. For now, though, you carry their whispers with you. You feel their eyes, their hands, their hunger. They are not gone. They never are. You walk on. The castle fades. The wolves grow silent. The snow and fog dissolve into another kind of darkness. A darkness shaped not by stone walls but by velvet curtains drawn across a screen. You hear the soft shuffle of an audience settling into seats. A projector whirs, light flares, and suddenly the vampire queen appears again, not in myth, not in ink, but in silver light. It is the early 20th century, and cinema is new. Silent films flicker, their actors moving in dreamlike gestures, words appearing in frames of text. Yet even without voices, the images carry power. And one of the first to step into this shadowed stage is a woman, cloaked in mystery, moving like smoke across the screen. Her name is Theda Bara. In 1915, she starred in A Fool There Was, playing not a vampire exactly, but a vamp, a femme fatale who seduces, drains, destroys. The word vampire here does not mean blood drinker, but soul stealer. She takes a respectable man and unravels his life with her gaze, her touch, her indifference. The audience is fascinated and horrified. Theda Bara becomes an icon, one of cinema's first queens of the night. You watch her on the screen, her eyes coal dark, her lips severe. She does not need fangs. She drains with her presence alone. She is Lilith reborn, Lamia without wings, Carmilla without crypt. And though she never drinks blood, the press calls her the vamp, and the name sticks. Soon the archetype spreads. The vamp becomes a type of woman in film, and in life, a dangerous beauty, a queen of hunger. The theatre is hushed as the film ends. The Bara vanishes into light, but her influence lingers. The vampire queen has crossed into cinema, reshaped into glamour and allure. The silent era embraces her. And then, in 1936, another queen appears. Gloria Holden in Dracula's Daughter. You see her emerge from the fog, pale and elegant, eyes heavy with sorrow. She is Countess Maria Zaleska, the daughter of Dracula himself. The film opens with Dracula's death, and she seeks freedom from her inheritance. Yet her hunger will not release her. She seeks victims, women especially, whom she lures with promises of art and intimacy. In one scene, she invites a young woman to her studio to pose. The woman, Lily, removes her blouse, baring her shoulders. The Countess approaches, gaze lingering, hand trembling. The moment is charged, delicate, and bold for its time. It is one of early cinema's most explicit depictions of queer desire, cloaked in horror, yet shimmering with intimacy. You sit in the theatre watching Gloria Holden's sorrowful queen. She is not monstrous in the way Dracula is. She is tragic, torn between hunger and longing, between freedom and fate. She is Carmilla reborn for a new century, her love made both tender and forbidden. The censors cut the film, trying to dull its edge, but still the story shines through. The vampire queen is here, alive on the screen, touching hands, whispering softly, hungering. The audience leaves the theatre, unsettled. They came for fright, but they carry home something stranger, a sense of beauty in the monster, of longing in the horror. The Queen of Vampires has claimed the silver screen, not just as a villain, but as a tragic heroine. Through the 1940s and 1950s, she lingers. Sometimes she is a shadow in lesser films, sometimes a fleeting figure, but always, when she appears, she carries a crown of allure. Then, in the 1960s and 70s, she rises higher. The Hammer horror films from Britain bring her back in vivid colour. Reds deeper, shadows darker, gowns flowing. Countesses and brides of vampires fill the screen, their eyes gleaming, their lips parted. Seduction and death blur into one. But those belong to another chapter. For now, in this silver screen dawn, you rest with the first. The Bara, the vamp, draining men with her gaze. Gloria Holden, the daughter of Dracula, torn between hunger and sorrow. Two queens, different crowns, yet both shaping how the vampire woman is seen. You close your eyes, and the projector flickers on your eyelids. The hum of the reel becomes the sound of breathing. The audience is gone, but you remain, sitting in the glow of the screen, watching the queen walk forward, closer, until the light fades and only her shadow is left. The flicker of the projector fades, the screen goes dark, and the theatre dissolves into shadow. You step out into another time, another world. It is the mid-20th century now, the years after war, when the air carries both relief and unease. Television hums in living rooms. Cars roll smooth across new highways, and cinema has grown louder, brighter, bolder. Horror is no longer silent or restrained. It spills across the screen in vivid color, and once again, the vampire queen takes her place. The year is 1957. A British studio called Hammer Films releases The Curse of Frankenstein. It is lurid, shocking, filled with red blood that looks almost too red to be real. Audiences flock to see it, and Hammer realizes they have found a new crown. 2 years later comes Dracula, starring Christopher Lee. He is tall, dark, aristocratic. His cape sweeps across the screen, his fangs glisten. He is both terrifying and strangely magnetic. And, behind him, soon come the women, the vampire brides, the countesses, the queens of Hammer horror. You walk through the corridors of a Hammer film set. The walls are painted stone. The chandeliers drip with wax. A coffin waits in the corner, lined with crimson velvet. On the floor, sawdust soaks up fake blood. Cameras roll, lights flare, and actresses step into the frame, pale, beautiful, their gowns low-cut, their eyes glowing. They are the heirs of Carmilla and the brides of Dracula, but now they move in color, in sound, in full presence. One film stands out, The Vampire Lovers, 1970, directly inspired by Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla. Here, Ingrid Pitt plays the vampire countess Mircalla Karnstein. Her hunger is for women, openly shown on screen, in a way that startled audiences of the time. She leans close, whispers, caresses, bites. Her victims swoon with fear and desire. The story, once whispered in Le Fanu's pages, now glows in Technicolor. Ingrid Pitt's performance crowns her as one of Hammer's great queens. She is regal, sensual, tragic, yet also playful. She moves through candlelit halls, like she owns them. And in a sense, she does. For a brief period in the 1970s, Hammer horror belongs to her, and to the other women who follow: blood countesses, vampire brides, undead seductresses, who dominate the posters, as much as the men did. The Karnstein trilogy follows: The Vampire Lovers, 1970, Lust for a Vampire, 1971, and Twins of Evil, 1971. Each revisits Carmilla in new ways, casting her again and again, sometimes tragic, sometimes cruel, always central. The Countess becomes a cinematic archetype, a vampire queen who rules both by hunger and by presence. You sit in a darkened cinema, watching her glide across the screen. The music swells, the colors saturate. When she bites, the blood gushes, shocking in its brightness. But beyond the gore, there is something quieter. The fascination, the beauty, the sorrow. The audience gasps, but their eyes remain fixed. They cannot look away. Around her, other Hammer queens rise. In Countess Dracula, 1971, Ingrid Pitt again plays Elizabeth Bathory herself, the Blood Countess of Hungary. This time, the legend of bathing in blood is fully embraced, shown in detail. She is portrayed as both predator and prisoner of vanity, desperate to preserve her youth. The old castle, the flickering torches, the pale skin, everything is painted larger than life. The myth of Bathory, whispered for centuries, now blooms in crimson on the screen. You walk through the rows of seats, hearing the murmurs of audiences. Some are scandalized, some thrilled, some secretly enchanted. The vampire queen is no longer only a whisper at the edge of myth. She is front and center, her image plastered on posters, her face lit up in cinema lobbies. What fascinates you is how these films treat her. She is almost always destroyed in the end. Staked, burned, silenced. Yet the films cannot help but linger on her allure. The camera loves her. The posters sell her. The audiences remember her. Destruction may end the story, but fascination keeps her alive. Hammer's queens are not subtle. Their beauty is emphasized, their hunger made clear, their sexuality flaunted. And yet, beneath the sensationalism, the same old questions remain. Why do these figures draw us in? Why do we fear them and long for them at once? Why does the vampire queen, more than the vampire king, embody both death and desire in equal measure? You leave the cinema into a foggy London night. The posters still glow in the windows, Ingrid Pitt smiles from one, her fangs bared, her gown crimson. She is both goddess and predator, both actress and archetype. She knows she will be killed by the final reel, but she also knows she will live forever in the minds of those who watch. The Hammer era wanes as the 1970s fade. Tastes change, horror shifts, but the queens remain. They move into new forms, new stories, new media. The stage is set for another transformation. Ahead lies literature again, lush and sprawling, where Anne Rice will crown her own Queen of the Damned. But for now you linger with Hammer's countesses, their laughter echoing in castle halls, their gowns rustling against stone floors, their hunger sharp as candle flame. The night deepens. The fog curls. The projector grows quiet. And you know the Queen will rise again. The fog of London drifts away, and the sound of Hammer's theatres fades into silence. You walk onward, and the road changes once again. The cobblestones smooth into concrete. The lanterns hum into electric light. The 20th century grows older, restless. Books pile high on shelves, their covers bold, their stories sprawling. Horror changes shape again, stretching beyond the Gothic castle, and into a world where myths are reimagined, where vampires speak in long confessional voices. And in this world, a new queen rises. Not whispered in lullabies, not glimpsed in trial records, not flickering in black and white. She steps forward fully imagined, powerful, ancient beyond measure. She is Akasha, the Queen of the Damned. It is 1976 when Anne Rice publishes Interview with the Vampire, a novel unlike any other of its time. It tells the story of Louis and Lestat, of immortality and hunger, of grief and desire. But it is in the second book of her vampire chronicles, The Vampire Lestat, 1985, and most vividly in the third, The Queen of the Damned, 1988, that Akasha enters. And with her the lineage of vampire queens finds one of its grandest thrones. Akasha is not a countess in a castle, nor a bride hidden in shadows. She is the first vampire, the mother of them all. Rice imagines her as an ancient queen of Egypt, turned immortal through a blood spirit. Thousands of years before Christ, her husband, Enkill, shares her fate, but it is Akasha who rules. Her body is kept still for centuries, a statue-like figure on a throne, until she awakens again in modern times. You imagine her rising. A figure carved in beauty, skin like polished stone, eyes dark with centuries of silence. When she speaks, her voice carries the weight of ages. She is both goddess and monster, both origin and end. Unlike Carmilla, who fed in secrecy, or Bathory, whose crimes were whispered, Akasha is open, unashamed. She claims the world as hers. Rice paints her not merely as predator, but as visionary. When Akasha wakes, she devises a plan to rid the world of men, to establish a new order where women rule. She seeks to destroy violence, yet through violence itself, she is at once liberator and tyrant, savior and destroyer. She embodies the paradox of power, its promise and its peril. You see her walking through cities, her presence unstoppable. Other vampires bow before her, or fear her. Some join her vision, others resist. Her hunger is not only for blood, but for dominion. She is the queen of all vampires, and her reign shakes the world. The novels linger on her presence, the way she moves, the way she watches, the way her ancient hunger radiates. She is not tragic in the way Carmilla was, not confined like Dracula's brides, not political rumor like Bathory. She is myth reborn, written for a modern audience that longed for something grander. In her, readers found the ultimate queen, the mother, the ruler, the origin of the vampire race. You sit with the book in your lap, its pages thick with description. Rice's style is lush, Gothic, almost overwhelming. Every detail of Akasha glows with richness. The silk of her robes, the smoothness of her skin, the fire of her eyes. You feel as though you are in her presence, as though she might reach from the page and place her hand upon your shoulder. And you sense something else too. Akasha carries the echoes of all the queens before her. In her hunger for blood, she recalls Lilith and Lamia. In her beauty and cruelty, she reflects Bathory. In her intimacy, her allure, She carries Carmilla in her dominion, her tragic grandeur. She outshines Dracula himself. She is the culmination of centuries of queens, drawn together into one. In 2002, her image expands again, onto the screen. Queen of the Damned. The film adapts Rice's tale, with singer Aaliyah playing Akasha. On screen, she is regal, magnetic, moving like flame. The film compresses the novels, but her presence dominates. Aaliyah's performance is remembered as iconic, even though her life ended too soon. For many, it was their first glimpse of Akasha, the queen in motion, her crown shimmering, her hunger undeniable. You think of how she differs from other queens. Where Carmilla whispered to a single woman, Akasha declares herself to the world. Where Bathory hid behind castle walls, Akasha walks openly through cities. Where Dracula's brides circled one man, Akasha demands the submission of all. She is not a figure at the margins. She is the center. She is the throne. And yet, like all queens of vampires, she too falls. Her vision is challenged, her body destroyed, but her presence endures. Readers still return to her pages, still whisper her name, still picture her rising from her throne in ancient Egypt, the first and greatest queen of the damned. You close the book. The room is quiet, but you feel her still. The weight of her centuries presses against your chest. The air smells faintly of incense, as though Egypt itself has brushed against you. And you know that in Akasha, the archetype of the vampire queen has reached one of its brightest flames. She will not be the last. Others will rise in comics, in films, in stories from around the world. But for now, you linger with her. You feel her gaze, ancient and unyielding. You bow, not from fear, but from awe. The road is long. The story moves on. Ahead lie pages filled with ink and color, where the vampire queen takes on new forms, heroes, villains, icons of pulp and pop. But tonight, in this chamber of words, Akasha reigns. The throne of Akasha fades into the distance, her golden crown dissolving into light, and you find yourself walking into a world of ink and paper once again. But the pages here are different. They are slick, bold, filled with color that leaps out at you. This is not the quiet hush of Gothic novels or the dim glow of theater screens. This is the realm of comics. Here, the vampire queen becomes sharper, more stylized, more immediate. She is drawn with curves and shadows, with flowing hair and dark eyes. Her presence is not whispered, but declared in bold type across a cover. Children and adults alike pick her up at corner shops, flip through her pages, and carry her home. The first name you see is Vampirella. She appears in 1969, in a magazine of the same name. Her creator Forrest J. Ackerman, and artist Trina Robbins, imagine her as an alien from the planet Dracula, where rivers flow not with water but with blood. She comes to Earth, scantily clad in a red costume, long black hair falling down her shoulders, her fangs small but visible. She is not simply a monster, she is a heroine, fighting evil even as she drinks blood herself. You picture her on the page, leaping across panels, her body dynamic, her expression fierce. She is both fantasy and parody, but she is also part of the lineage. The Queen of Vampires reimagined for pulp and pop culture. For decades her series continues, changing with the times, but always placing her at the center. She is both object of desire and agent of action. In the same years, other comic queens rise. In the world of horror magazines, women appear again and again as seductive monsters, sometimes cruel, sometimes sympathetic. Lady Death arrives in the 1990s, pale-skinned, silver-haired, a queen of hell itself, commanding armies. She is not a vampire in the strictest sense, but her design draws from the same well, regal, deadly, beautiful, powerful. She rules by fear and by fascination, like Lilith and Carmilla before her. You flip through panels. The ink is heavy, the colors sharp, the stories are sometimes thin, but the images linger. The vampire queen, once whispered in folk tales, now stares out from glossy pages in convenience stores and comic shops. She is not hidden in shadows anymore. She sells, she entertains, she conquers. And beyond the pulp, you see her appear in darker, stranger comics. In Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, in Neil Gaiman's Sandman, the figure of the femme fatale, the blood drinker, the Death Queen flickers in and out. Part of a larger tapestry of myth, she is never far away. The archetype persists, reshaped for each new world. What comics reveal is how adaptable the Queen truly is. She can be alien or earthly, villain or heroine, tragic or triumphant. She can wear the crown of horror or of fantasy, of pulp or of high art. She reigns across panels because she is endlessly pliable, endlessly fascinating. You set the comic down. The paper smells faintly of ink, of dust. The image of Vampirella smiles up at you, her fangs just showing. She is not Lilith, not Lamia, not Carmilla, and yet she is all of them too. Their legacy flows through her, through every queen of vampires that comics bring to life. The room fades, and you are left with the sense that the vampire queen has expanded her dominion. No longer confined to myth or literature, she now rules the world of popular culture, her face on covers, her form in the hands of readers everywhere. She has become a global icon. Ahead, she waits in even stranger forms, not only in Europe or America, but in stories from every corner of the world. The Pontianak waits in Southeast Asia, the Cihuateteo in Mexico, queens of vampires, crowned in other traditions, speaking in other tongues. But for now, you close the comic, let the paper settle, and watch as her shadow stretches across the panels, reaching outward into every new story. The glossy pages of comics fade in your hands, the ink dissolving into the air like smoke. You step once more onto the long road of stories, and the horizon shifts. For so long, the queens of vampires have worn mostly European crowns. Goddesses of Mesopotamia, serpents of Greece, brides of Dracula, countesses in castles. But the hunger for blood, the fear of women who cross the boundaries of life and death, is not bound to Europe. It lives everywhere. Every culture has whispered its own names, its own shapes, its own queens of shadow. Tonight, you walk among them. The air grows humid, heavy with the scent of tropical flowers and rain-soaked earth. You find yourself in Southeast Asia. Here the stories are alive with sound, with cries in the night, with laughter that turns to horror, and among them walks the Pontianak. In Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, people tell of her, a woman who died in childbirth. Returning to haunt the living, by day, she may appear beautiful. Long hair, pale skin, a sweet voice. By night, she becomes terrifying. Her nails, long and sharp, her teeth ready to tear. She lures men with her beauty, then drinks their blood, rips their flesh. She is feared most near banana trees where she is said to dwell, her laughter high and eerie. You pause beneath a stand of trees. The air buzzes with insects. The leaves shift in the breeze. Somewhere, you hear a sound, half giggle, half scream. You remember the old warning. If you hear her laughter close, you are safe. If it is faint, she is near. The trick of the tale makes you smile faintly, even as you shiver. The Pontianak is both tragic and terrifying. She was once a mother-to-be, a life cut short. But she returns not with sorrow, but with rage. She drains not children, but men, punishing them, haunting them. She is both victim and avenger. Her hunger born from injustice. She is crowned queen of the night in her corner of the world, her legend whispered by generations. You walk on, and the air changes again. It grows drier, hotter, the sun sharp above, though you walk at night. You are in Mexico now, in the land of the Aztecs. Here too, women who died in childbirth were feared. They were called the Cihuateteo. The Aztecs honored warriors who died in battle as heroes, and in their eyes, women who died in childbirth were warriors too, fighting for life, for the future. But honor and fear are never far apart. These women, buried with ritual, were said to return as spirits. They haunted crossroads wailing, seeking children to steal, sometimes attacking the living. Their faces were white with chalk, their clothes adorned with bones. They were both sacred and terrifying, mothers who became monsters. You stand at a crossroads under the stars. The earth smells of dust. The wind carries faint drumming from a far-off temple. You hear a cry high and sharp. Is it grief or rage or hunger? You cannot tell. The Sequoia do not explain themselves. They come, they strike, they vanish. Their legends spread into later centuries, merging with Spanish stories of the La Llorona, the weeping woman, who wanders riversides mourning her drowned children. La Llorona too became a vampire queen of sorts, draining life not through fangs, but through sorrow and touch. Again and again you see the same shape, a woman, wronged or broken by death, returning to take what was denied. You move again, across oceans, into Japan. The night here is quieter, the houses wooden, the gardens raked in perfect sand, but the stories are not quiet. They whisper of the Kuchisaki owner, the slit-mouthed woman, who asks if she is beautiful. If you say yes, she removes her mask, revealing her torn mouth, then slashes you to match. If you say no, she kills you. She is not a vampire in the strictest sense, but she embodies the same crown. A woman whose beauty conceals horror, whose hunger is for vengeance and fear. Other Japanese spirits drink blood directly. The Yuki owner, the snow woman, appears on winter nights, pale and lovely, luring travelers into the cold, draining their warmth, their breath, their life. She is ice instead of fire, but she too belongs to the lineage of queens. Untouchable, irresistible, deadly. You stand in the snow with her. Her robe is white, her hair long, her eyes cold as the moon. She does not speak. She only breathes out a cloud of frost. And your strength slips away. And then, another turn of the world. You are in the Philippines, where the aswang prowls, women who can detach their upper bodies, sprouting wings, flying at night to drink blood. They slip long tongues through windows to feed on unborn children. By day, they are ordinary. By night, they are queens of terror. They are hunted with salt and garlic, with spears and prayers. But always, the stories return. The aswang is never fully banished. What links all of these? The Pontianak, the Siwateteo, the Yuki-onna, the aswang. You notice the thread. So often they are women who died wrongly before their time, in childbirth, in betrayal. So often they embody both beauty and horror, both grief and rage. They punish, they avenge, they drain, they frighten. Not just because of their hunger, but because of their refusal to stay gone. They come back, they take what was denied. You stand at a crossroads of the world. You hear laughter from banana trees, wailing from riversides, silence from snowy fields, wings beating above nipa huts. They are all here, these queens of the night, each in her own land, each in her own tongue. And you realize something. The vampire queen is not one figure, not one story. She is many. She is every culture's way of naming the fear of women's power, the fear of death's refusal, the fear of desire that cannot be controlled. She is everywhere. She reigns across continents. You breathe in the night air. It is heavy with jasmine, with dust, with frost, with salt, the sense of many worlds. The queens linger all around you, unseen, their crowns made of hunger and memory. Ahead lies the modern world, where screens multiply, where stories travel faster than ever before. There the vampire queen will step again into new crowns. Television, film, streaming, comedy, tragedy. But tonight, here you linger with the global queens. You honor them. You listen to their laughter, their cries, their silence. The air shifts again, carrying you out of the crossroads of global myths and into a more familiar glow. The soft hum of televisions, the gleam of cinema screens, the flicker of streaming windows glowing in darkened rooms. You are in the modern age now, the late 20th century through the early 21st. Stories move faster than ever. They cross borders, languages and genres. And everywhere, the vampire queen continues to reign, her crown adapting, her hunger renewed. You sit in a living room, in the 1990s. The television hums, static settling before an image sharpens. A girl in California walks through a cemetery at night, wooden stake in hand. She is Buffy Summers, the vampire slayer, But just as Buffy became iconic, so too did the queens she fought. Buffy the Vampire Slayer filled its nights with vampire women, Dracula, pale and psychic, whispering prophecies with a childlike voice. Darla, centuries old, walking the line between elegance and cruelty. Each had their own stories, their own power. They were not nameless brides. They had voices, histories, agency. They shaped the battles as much as any king or master. You remember Drusilla most? She was fragile and terrifying, her madness making her unpredictable, her hunger never fully controlled. She reigned through her strangeness, through her refusal to fit any mold. She was both victim and predator, a crown of broken glass balanced on her head. The audience loved her for it. In Buffy's world, queens of vampires were no longer shadows in the corner. They were central characters, layered and alive. From Buffy you walk into another room, another screen. This time the glow is richer, darker, filled with sultry southern heat. The series is True Blood, premiering in. It imagines a world where vampires have come out of the coffin, revealing themselves to humanity, living among mortals thanks to synthetic blood, called True Blood. And in this world, queens rule openly. You meet Sophie Anne Leclerc, the vampire queen of Louisiana. She sits in a sunlit mansion, playing chess, her body draped in silk, her accent smooth. She is centuries old, but she masks it with playfulness, charm, whimsy. Yet beneath the games lies power. She commands her subjects, plots behind smiles, wields influence like a blade. When she is betrayed, her fury is sharp. She embodies the archetype, fully regal, deadly, magnetic. In True Blood, vampire queens are not rumors. They are political figures, rulers in a hierarchy. They have courts, laws, and enemies. They are monarchs of blood, blending myth with modern power struggles. The series lingers on their presence, reminding viewers that the vampire queen is not just a lover or a monster. She is a sovereign commanding loyalty and fear. From the sultry south, you walk into another world, cold, sleek, urban. The film is Underworld, 2003. A storm of leather and gunfire, vampires and werewolves, locked in endless war. At its center stands a queen of sorts. Selene, played by Kate Beckinsale. She is not a queen by title, but by presence. A death dealer, skilled, unyielding, draped in black latex and moving with precision. She is a warrior queen, her hunger sublimated into vengeance and strength. Selene is different from Carmilla, from Bathory, from Akasha. She is not framed as villain, but as heroine, though still steeped in blood and shadow. She fights for justice, for love, for survival. She is a queen of the modern action era, where vampires no longer only haunt bedrooms, but leap across rooftops, firing silver bullets. Yet her crown is still the same: beauty, danger, command. You sit in the theater watching her, the music pulses, the battles rage, and yet your eyes never leave her. She is the center of the storm, the queen in a world of monsters. And then you turn to laughter. For queens reign not only in horror and action, but in comedy too. In What We Do in the Shadows, both film and television, vampires are parodied, their quirks exaggerated. But even here women claim crowns. Nadja, the vampire from the series, reigns with wit, sarcasm, and hunger. She tells stories of her past lives, of loves and betrayals, her accent thick, her humor sharp. She is queen of her small household, scolding and seducing in equal measure. Through her the archetype becomes playful, but no less commanding. You smile at her lines, her sly glances, her unbothered confidence. Even in comedy the vampire queen endures, her crown unshaken. Modern film and television offer endless faces. In Blade, vampires gather in clubs and boardrooms, with queens among them pulling strings. In Van Helsing, brides and countesses return, draped in CGI and thunder. In Hotel Transylvania, even children laugh with a cartoon vampire daughter growing into her crown. The archetype has scattered into every genre, every age group. Wherever vampires go, queens follow. You reflect on what has changed. In earlier centuries, the vampire queen was often punished, silenced, destroyed. In modern stories she sometimes still falls, but often she survives. Sometimes she even leads. She is no longer only cautionary figure. She is icon, protagonist, anti-hero. Audiences cheer for her, as much as they fear her. You pause in the glow of a screen. You hear the echoes of Drusilla's whisper, Sophian's laughter, Celine's gunfire, Nadja's sarcasm. They are all queens in their own way, each wearing a crown suited to their age. They remind you that the vampire queen is not one story but many, always adapting, always ruling, always stepping into the light again. The screens dim, the night grows quieter. Ahead lies reflection, the question of why these figures endure, why they fascinate, why they frighten. But for now, you linger in the glow of modern queens, their crowns gleaming through pixels and projectors. The glow of television screens fades, the neon of cinemas dissolves, and you find yourself walking into a quieter space. The noise of audiences, the cheers and gasps, fall away. Now you stand in a hall of mirrors, long and dim, each surface reflecting fragments of faces. Lilith, Lamia, Bathory, Carmilla, the brides, Akasha, Vampirella, Celine, Nadja. They stare back at you, each one familiar, each one strange. They are all queens, and yet each is different. You walk slowly among the reflections, and you ask yourself, why do these queens endure? Why do they fascinate across centuries and continents? Why do they return again and again, wearing new masks, but always recognizable? The answer, perhaps, is that they are not only monsters, they are metaphors. You look into the first mirror, and you see desire. The vampire queen embodies hunger, hunger for blood, hunger for touch, hunger for power. In many stories, her hunger is framed as wrong, dangerous, unnatural, and yet it is the very thing that makes her magnetic. In eras when women were expected to be passive, pure, obedient, the vampire queen was the opposite. She wanted, she reached, she claimed. Desire, when placed in the body of a woman, has often been feared. It is why Lamia was cursed, why Carmilla was destroyed, why Dracula's brides were staked. Their desire threatened the order of things, yet that same threat made them unforgettable. To see a woman want without apology, without restraint, was both terrifying and enthralling. The vampire queen is the embodiment of that paradox. You move to the next mirror, and you see power. So many vampire queens are aristocrats, countesses, daughters of lords, rulers of domains. Bathory ruled a castle. Carmilla moved in noble circles. Akasha ruled an empire. Sophian reigned over Louisiana. The queen is never only a victim, she is often a sovereign, commanding others, bending wills, shaping worlds. Power in a woman has often been treated as monstrous. A man who rules is a king. A woman who rules is dangerous, unnatural, suspect. The vampire queen carries that suspicion openly. Her power is linked with death, with blood, with the supernatural, and yet she is crowned all the same. In the very act of fearing her, stories acknowledge her authority. You stand before another mirror, and you see beauty. The vampire queen is almost always described as beautiful, alluring, magnetic. Her beauty is her weapon, her lure, her disguise. But it is also a trap for those who gaze too long. Beauty, in patriarchal stories, is both desired and distrusted. To admire a woman too much is to risk being undone by her. The vampire queen embodies that fear, turning beauty into danger, attraction into threat. And then, another mirror, death. The queen is always tied to it. She feeds on blood, she haunts graves, she returns from the womb of earth. She is a reminder that death is not only an ending, but a presence that lingers. In many cultures, women were midwives, caretakers of birth and death alike. To place death in their hands, to imagine them wielding it as power, is both natural and terrifying. The vampire queen is not just about fear of women, but fear of mortality itself. You walk deeper into the hall. The mirrors multiply. You see another theme, forbidden love. Carmilla's intimacy with Laura, Akasha's vision of remaking the world, the queer undertones of Dracula's daughter, the lesbian countesses of Hammer films, all reveal that vampire queens often embody desires considered taboo. Queer love, female autonomy, relationships outside marriage, all find expression through them. And though the stories often punish them, audiences remember the hunger more than the punishment. In another mirror, you see rebellion. Lilith refusing to submit to Adam. Bathory refusing to yield to king or church. Modern queens refusing to fade into background. They are rebels by nature, whether against men, against death, or against the order of things. They embody fear of chaos, but also admiration for resistance. You pause before a tall mirror, cracked across its face. Here you see how queens of vampires are often metaphors for social anxiety. In the Middle Ages, they reflected fear of women outside domestic life. In the Victorian era, they reflected fear of sexuality and disease. In the 20th century, they reflected both desire and anxiety around feminism, queer identity, and changing gender roles. Each age writes its own fear into their crown. And yet, in every age, audiences are drawn to them. The metaphors frighten, but they also liberate. To see a vampire queen is to glimpse a woman untethered, refusing rules, feeding when she pleases, commanding with a glance. Even when destroyed, she remains alluring. The destruction never erases the fascination. You walk farther. The mirrors narrow into a corridor. You hear whispers as you pass. One says, "She is punishment." Another says, "She is freedom." Another, "She is you." You realize the vampire queen is both projection and reflection. She is what cultures fear women might be, and what women themselves might secretly wish to claim: freedom, hunger, power, immortality. She is scapegoat and icon, villain and heroine. That duality is why she endures. You emerge from the Hall of Mirrors into open air. The night is wide, the stars sharp. You carry with you the sense that the vampire queen is not only a character, but a lens. Through her, societies explore their darkest questions. What does it mean to desire without shame? What does it mean to rule without apology? What does it mean to return from death and refuse silence? And as you do, you hear footsteps ahead. They are softer than mirrors breaking, lighter than queens in silk gowns. They are the footsteps of real women, not myths, who were once accused of vampirism. Women mistaken for monsters, remembered as queens of the undead. That is where the road leads next. The mirrors of metaphor fade behind you, the glass shattering into starlight. The path ahead grows colder, narrower. The stories you have walked with so far have been myths and legends, books and films, symbols and metaphors. But now you step into another layer of history, one made of earth and bone, of coffins and graves, of women whose names were whispered not in fiction but in accusation. For centuries, real women have been mistaken for vampires. Some were remembered as monsters, others as restless spirits, some as queens of the undead. Their stories linger in burial sites, in trial records, in the dirt where the living tried to pin the dead down. Tonight, you walk among them. The first grave opens in Eastern Europe. The soil is damp, the night heavy with mist. In a small village, the people are restless. A plague has come, or perhaps it is famine. Children sicken, neighbors grow pale. Cattle die without reason. Fear searches for a face to blame, and often that face is a woman's. You see her, in memory. Perhaps she was a widow, living on the edge of the village. Perhaps she was old, her teeth crooked, her eyes too sharp. Perhaps she was young and beautiful, envied by others. Whatever the reason, when sickness spread, the villagers turned to her grave. They dug it up, they pried open the coffin. Inside, they found what they did not expect. A body too well preserved, lips still red, hair still long, cheeks flushed with color. They did not know then that some corpses decompose slowly, that gases can swell the skin, that fluids can stain the mouth. To them, it looked like she had fed in death, like she had risen at night to drain her neighbors. They drove a stake through her chest. They cut her head off. They called her vampire. Many such graves have been found. Archaeologists have uncovered skeletons with stones jammed into their mouths, scythes laid across their throats, bricks pressed against their jaws. These were apotropaic burials, meant to keep the dead from rising, to stop them from feeding. And many of these skeletons were women Women whose deaths were suspicious, whose lives were unusual, whose memories frightened the living. You walk past one such grave in Venice. The body is a woman's, buried with a brick between her jaws. In life she may have been a plague victim. In death she was called a vampira. When bodies were exhumed during the Black Death, villagers feared that some corpses were spreading the sickness. They saw blood at the mouth and believed it was evidence of feeding. The brick was a gag, meant to silence her hunger forever. Another grave. In Poland, a woman buried with a sickle across her neck, so that if she rose, the blade would cut her. She is called the Vampire Woman of Drawsko. Her bones tell no story of evil, only that she lived and died like countless others, but her community feared her enough to bind her even in death. She too is remembered now as a queen of vampires, though she never asked for such a crown. You pause and listen to the whispers of these women. They did not write novels, did not star in films, did not stride through myths. They lived ordinary lives, mothers, daughters, midwives, healers, and yet, when fear struck, they were marked as monsters. Their graves became cages, their memory twisted into tales of blood. What strikes you most is how often this happened to women at the edges of society. The widow, the healer, the foreigner, the woman who did not fit. They were already set apart, already suspicious. When misfortune came, they bore the blame, and in that blame, they became immortal, not in truth but in legend. You step farther, into New England in the 19th century. The soil is colder here, the houses wood instead of stone. And here too, fear of vampires took root. In Rhode Island, the Brown family suffered consumption, what we now call tuberculosis. One by one, family members sickened and died. When the illness lingered, neighbors whispered that someone dead was feeding on the living. They exhumed Mercy Brown, a young woman who had died at 19. Her body, kept in cold ground, was still preserved. They cut out her heart and burned it, feeding the ashes to her brother as a cure. He died soon after. Mercy became the New England vampire, though she was only a girl, sick like the rest. You stand by her grave, still there in Exeter, Rhode Island. A plain stone, her name etched simply. Visitors leave flowers, trinkets, notes. She has become famous now, her story told in books and tours. A queen of vampires, though in truth, she was only a victim of disease and fear. There are many others. In Connecticut, in Vermont, in towns scattered across New England, similar stories unfolded. Women and men alike were dug up, accused, mutilated to prevent their return. But it is Mercy's name that remains strongest, perhaps because she was young, perhaps because her story reached Bram Stoker himself, inspiring whispers of Dracula. You think of her alongside the women of Venice and Poland, alongside the countless unnamed accused in Europe. Together they form a different kind of lineage, not queens of fiction or myth, but of memory, crowned by suspicion. Their crowns are heavy, made not of gold, but of fear. As you walk among their graves, you feel both sorrow and awe. Sorrow for the women who could not rest, whose bodies were disturbed, whose names were twisted. Awe for how their stories endure, how even in accusation they live on, reshaped, retold, remembered. They were called vampires, though they were not. They were mistaken for monsters, though they were only human. And yet, in being mistaken, they became part of the greater story. Their names stand beside Lilith, Bathory, Carmilla, Akash. They too are queens now, in the way memory makes queens of those who linger. The graves close behind you. The mist lifts. Ahead lies the final stretch of your journey, the present day, where the vampire queen reigns. Not in fear or accusation, but in fascination, cosplay, novels, art, endless reinvention. She is not gone. She will never be gone. The graves close behind you, the earth settles, and the mist dissolves into the present. You step forward, and the air feels different, quicker, brighter, humming with electricity. It is the modern age now, the world of glowing screens and constant voices, where myths are not left in cemeteries or books, but move at the speed of light, and still the vampire queen reigns. She has not vanished, She has only changed her crown once again. You walk through a convention hall, filled with bright banners, stalls of merchandise, the murmur of crowds. Here she is, everywhere. A girl walks past in Carmilla's lace. Another strides by, in Celine's black leather. A child laughs, her cape too long, her teeth plastic but proud. Vampire queens are not just remembered. They are lived, embodied, played. Cosplay brings them from story into flesh, from screen into street. They are no longer figures of fear alone, but of identity, of celebration. You pause before an artist's table. Drawings line the walls. Bathory's pale face, Nadja's smirk, Akasha's regal stance. Each is a reimagining, a tribute. In the sketchbooks of young creators, the queens live again, reshaped into new forms. Some are gentle, some are fierce, some are tragic. Each wears a crown of ink, of color, of imagination. The internet carries them farther still. Stories of vampire queens appear in webcomics, in fan fiction, in games. They are streamed, shared, retold. A player logs into a role-playing game and makes her avatar a vampire queen, ruling a kingdom of shadows. A writer uploads a story where Carmilla survives and triumphs. A filmmaker posts a short video, her own version of Bathory, not cruel but misunderstood. The archetype spreads endlessly, reborn in each telling. You see how the fascination endures. People are still drawn to these figures, women who defy rules, who embody desire, who return from death. The hunger is not just for blood, but for story, for symbol, for something beyond ordinary life. In a world that often still asks women to be quiet, obedient, pleasing, the vampire queen offers another path. Hunger, command, immortality. She is a mirror for those who feel too much, want too much, refuse too much. You step into a bookstore. The shelves gleam with new novels. Some are lush and gothic, filled with castles and crypts. Others are sharp and modern, filled with cities and neon. In them, the vampire queen appears again and again, sometimes as villain, sometimes as hero, sometimes as both at once. Young adult novels tell of girls discovering their hunger. Adult fiction spins whole worlds where vampire courts and queens rule. Each story adds to the lineage, weaving new threads into the old crown. And beyond books and screens, you see her in art. Paintings of Lilith, with wings spread. Digital portraits of Carmilla, with blood at her lips. Sculptures of nameless brides, their faces half shadow. The vampire queen is muse, as much as monster. She inspires, because she embodies extremes, beauty and horror, love and death, desire and danger. You walk farther, into the quiet of the night. In the city, lights gleam in towers. Cars hum along streets. People move quickly under lamps. Yet even here, you feel her. She is in the fashion of dark clothes, in the sharp lines of eyeliner, in the tattoos of bats and moons. She is in the playlists of music, the lyrics that whisper of blood and desire. She is in the jokes people tell, the memes that spread, the Halloween costumes pulled on each year. She is everywhere, half serious, half playful, wholly alive. You realize now that the vampire queen is more than a character. She is a language. Each time she appears, she says something about the age that created her. In ancient Mesopotamia, she embodied fear of mothers who devour. In Greece, she embodied grief turned monstrous. In Rome, she was a shrieking owl woman. In the Middle Ages, a hag pressing on chests, a succubus draining monks. In Hungary, a noblewoman accused of bathing in blood. In Gothic fiction, a lover who whispers in the dark. In Dracula, a bride whose beauty terrifies. In film, a daughter, a countess, a seductress. In comics, a heroine in red. In Rice's novels, a goddess of Egypt remaking the world. In global myth, she is Pontianak, Cihuateteo, Aswang, Yuki Onna. In television and film today, she is queen, warrior, comedian, icon. In art and culture now, she is symbol, archetype, mirror. The crown is never the same, but it is always there. You walk to the edge of the city, where the lights fade into sky. The stars above are sharp, the moon silver. You think of all the women who have worn this crown, real and imagined. Lilith refusing to bow, Lamia wandering sleepless, Bathory in her castle, Carmilla at Laura's side, Dracula's brides in their laughter, Akasha on her golden throne, Vampirella in pulp pages, Selene leaping across rooftops, Nadja cracking jokes in Staten Island, Mercy Brown in her Rhode Island grave, each one a queen, each one unforgettable. And you realize the dream endures because it speaks to something deep. The Vampire Queen is not only about fear of women, she is about longing for what is forbidden, fascination with what cannot be controlled, and admiration for those who break boundaries. She endures because she answers questions we are still asking. What does it mean to want without apology, to rule without permission, to live beyond death and still claim a crown? The answers are never final. They change with each age, each telling. But the question remains, glowing like the moon, whispered like laughter in the night. You close your eyes. The world grows quiet. You hear only breath, your own, steady and slow. The queens of vampires step back into shadow, their crowns dimming, their voices soft. They will rise again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. They always do. The road is ending now. The torches have gone out. The castles, the crossroads, the theatres, the graves, they all fade into mist. You are left only with the quiet, the hum of your own breath, the steady rhythm of your heart. The vampire queens recede into memory, their faces dissolving like smoke, their crowns laid aside for now. They are not gone. They will never be gone. But they step back, giving you space to rest. You feel your body sinking deeper into the bed, or the chair, or wherever you are. The fabric against your skin, the weight of blankets, the cool of the air. It all reminds you that you are here, safe, alive. The queens belong to story. You belong to rest. Each breath carries you farther from thought, closer to sleep. Each exhale softens the edges of the world. The questions can wait. The stories can wait. The queens will still be there when you return. For now, you drift. You drift through silence, through dark that is gentle, through dreams that rise like fog. You drift into a place where time is slow, where nothing is asked of you, where rest itself is the crown you wear. The vampire queens watch from afar, their shadows long, their eyes calm. They do not follow, they only linger, like memory, like myth, like the stars above. Sleep now. The night is wide. The story is finished, but your dreams are just beginning. Good night. Sweet dreams.